Have you ever caught yourself making up excuses not to go to that meetup? Have you felt a tightness in your chest just thinking about being in a room full of people? Maybe you cancel plans at the last minute, ignore messages, or simply disappear when someone tries to get close. But why does this happen? What makes someone avoid people as if running from real danger? Today, we're going to dive deep into the mind of someone who avoids social contact and understand the psychological reasons behind this behavior that often imprisons people. Imagine someone who turns down party invitations, looks away when passing acquaintances on the street, or invents last-minute problems to avoid showing up to commitments. This person isn't simply shy or introverted. There's a huge difference between someone who likes being alone to recharge their batteries and someone who runs from social situations out of paralyzing fear. Introversion, as psychologist Carl Jung explained, is just a natural way of relating to the world, turned inward, toward one's own thoughts and feelings. There's nothing wrong with that. But when withdrawal comes from fear, from intense discomfort, or from the conviction that something bad is going to happen, we're talking about social avoidance, a behavioral pattern that imprisons. Social avoidance isn't a conscious choice by someone who prefers solitude. It's an automatic reaction, almost instinctive, in the face of situations that should be normal. The person who avoids may even want to go to their friend's birthday party, but something inside them screams that it's dangerous, that it'll go wrong, that it's better to stay home. This behavior has deep roots in psychology. Alfred Adler, another giant of psychology, associated this pattern with the inferiority complex, that painful feeling of being less capable, less interesting, or less valuable than others. When someone carries that weight, each social interaction transforms into a threat, a stage where their inadequacies will be exposed. So the solution seems obvious. Avoid the stage completely. Think about everyday situations. An avoidant person receives an invitation to a barbecue, and immediately their mind fires off a series of worries. What if nobody talks to me? What if I say something stupid? What if they realize I'm not cool enough? These questions hammer away non-stop. On the day of the event, the anxiety increases so much that the person ends up sending a message saying they can't make it, inventing some excuse. The moment they cancel, immediate relief comes. The tension disappears. But this relief works as a psychological trap that we need to understand deeply because it's what keeps the whole pattern running. This pattern doesn't arise from nowhere. Behind the avoidance, there's always a deep fear, a silent terror that dominates the person's mind. And the most common fear is of others' judgment. For someone who avoids, every look, every word, every gesture from others seems to carry critical evaluation. The person feels like they're constantly being watched, analyzed, weighed on an invisible scale, and found lacking. This feeling isn't an exaggeration for those who live it. It's a psychological reality so intense that it controls every decision. Adler understood this mechanism well. He realized that people with profound feelings of inferiority live anticipating criticism and rejection. It doesn't matter if others are actually judging or not. In the avoidant person's mind, the judgment is already happening. They look at a neutral expression on someone's face and interpret it as disapproval. They hear laughter in the distance and are certain people are laughing at them. These interpretations aren't conscious choices. They're automatic reactions from a mind that learned to see danger where often none exists. Automatic thoughts invade without asking permission. They'll realize I'm inadequate. Everyone's judging me. I'm going to make a fool of myself. These phrases echo in the person's head like absolute truths. And the more they believe these ideas, the stronger they become. The person avoids a social situation out of fear of judgment, experiences that powerful relief we mentioned, and their nervous system registers a dangerous equation. Fear plus avoidance equals safety. This deceptive formula gets engraved deeper and deeper into neural circuits, becoming practically a conditioned reflex. This avoidance pattern has even deeper roots. It's not just about fear of judgment. It's about how the person sees themselves. There's a core belief, often unconscious, that feeds all avoidant behavior. This belief says, I'm not good enough, I'm inadequate, I'm defective, there's something fundamentally wrong with me. Adler called this the inferiority complex, and it's one of the most important concepts for understanding social avoidance. Imagine carrying a deep conviction that you're less valuable than other people. It's not about having low self-esteem on a bad day. It's about believing, deep down, that there's something in you that makes you unacceptable, uninteresting, or unworthy of love and connection. People with this complex don't think they're bad at something. They feel they are bad, period. That their very existence is problematic. And when you believe this about yourself, every social situation becomes a huge risk. Because if people really get to know you, they'll discover the truth about you. They'll see that you're no good. So it's better to keep your distance, hide who you are, prevent them from finding out. This feeling of inadequacy doesn't appear alone in someone's life. There's usually a story behind it, and that story almost always involves pain. Negative experiences leave deep marks on the human psyche. A child who suffered bullying at school, who was humiliated in front of classmates, who repeatedly heard they were dumb, ugly, or weird, carries these wounds into adult life. A teenager who was rejected by the group, excluded from parties, ignored by people they liked, learns that social interactions hurt. An adult who went through betrayal, abandonment, or rejection in important relationships develops a deep distrust of others. Jung understood that these traumatic experiences don't simply disappear with time. They form what he called unconscious emotional complexes. They're like psychological wounds that never healed properly. These complexes are stored in the unconscious, but they don't stay quiet. They activate automatically whenever a present situation reminds them, even remotely, of the original trauma. The person may not consciously remember the day they were humiliated at school 20 years ago, but when they enter a room full of people, that old pain awakens. The body reacts, the heart races, the mind screams danger, and the impulse to flee becomes uncontrollable. The unconscious works through associations. If in the past social situations brought pain, humiliation, rejection, or abandonment, the brain creates a simple equation. Social situation equals emotional danger. And when the brain detects danger, it activates the protection system. It doesn't matter if the danger is real or not. The body reacts as if it were. And what's the natural reaction to danger? Flee, avoid, get away. Social avoidance, seen from this angle, isn't weakness or laziness. It's a desperate attempt at protection against a threat that seems very real to those who experience it. And when this threat is perceived, the entire body enters maximum alert mode. Social anxiety isn't just mental discomfort. It manifests physically, intensely, and often terrifyingly. Imagine being at a meeting, at a party, or simply talking with someone, and suddenly your heart starts beating so hard it feels like it'll burst from your chest. Your hands start trembling. Sweat runs down your forehead, your back. You feel a tightness in your throat, difficulty breathing. Your legs go weak. Your mind goes completely blank and you can't form coherent sentences anymore. These are the classic symptoms of paralyzing social anxiety. What happens in the body during these moments is fascinating and terrifying at the same time. The nervous system can't differentiate between a real physical threat, like a wild animal attacking, and a perceived social threat, like having to speak in public or talk with strangers. So it activates the same fight-or-flight response that our ancestors used to survive. Stress hormones flood the body. Blood goes to the large muscles, preparing to run or fight. Non-essential functions like digestion and complex thinking are shut down. That's why the person feels nausea, mental blanks, and difficulty reasoning. For those who live this, interacting socially isn't just uncomfortable. It's physically painful and psychologically devastating. Each social encounter becomes torture. And when you experience this level of suffering repeatedly, the mind seeks any available solution. Avoidance emerges not as weakness, but as a survival strategy. The problem is that this strategy, while effective in the moment, feeds the very beast it tries to tame. Each escape confirms to the nervous system that the danger was real, increasing sensitivity for next time. The person gets trapped in a spiral where avoiding creates more need to avoid. There's still another deep aspect that feeds this avoidance. Jung talked about the shadow, a fascinating and disturbing psychological concept. The shadow is composed of all the aspects of ourselves that we reject, deny, or try to hide. There are imperfections, our vulnerabilities, our desires we judge unacceptable, our deepest fears, our human failures. Everyone has a shadow. It's part of being human. But some people carry an intense fear that others will see these rejected parts of themselves. Think about it. You have aspects of yourself you consider shameful. Maybe it's your insecurity, your anger, your envy, your fantasies, your failures, your weaknesses. You probably hide these things from other people, showing only an edited and acceptable version of yourself. This is normal to a certain extent. But for those who intensely avoid social contact, this fear of being truly seen is paralyzing. The person is terrified that if they allow intimacy, if they lower their guard, if they let someone really know them, that person will see the shadow. And upon seeing it, they'll be scared, disappointed, and inevitably reject them. So the solution found is to keep everyone at a safe distance. Superficial relationships, shallow conversations, no real vulnerability. Because vulnerability means risk. It means someone might see who you really are beneath the mask. And if you believe that who you really are is unacceptable, then you'll never allow anyone to get close enough to find out. Social avoidance, seen from this angle, is a desperate attempt to protect the fragmented ego from the inevitable pain of rejection. But in doing this, the person condemns themselves to permanent loneliness and disconnection. Because genuine connection only happens when there's risk, when there's vulnerability, when we allow ourselves to be seen. And there's one more aspect that makes everything even more complicated. Many people who avoid social contact are social perfectionists. This means they have impossible standards for their own interactions. It's not enough to just talk with someone. The conversation needs to be interesting, fluid, impressive. It's not enough to be present at a party. You need to be funny, charismatic, memorable. These people demand impeccable performance from themselves in every social interaction, as if each conversation were a test where any mistake means total failure. Adler understood that this pursuit of perfection often comes from an attempt to compensate for feelings of inferiority. The unconscious logic is, if I'm perfect, nobody will notice that I'm inadequate. If I never make mistakes, they'll never reject me. But this creates an impossible trap. Because nobody's perfect. Everyone commits social gaffes. Everyone says something weird sometimes. Everyone has moments where they don't know what to say. That's being human. But for the social perfectionist, these small stumbles are devastating proof of their inadequacy. So what happens? The person looks at a social situation and thinks of all the things that could go wrong. I might stutter. I might say something boring. I might not know how to answer a question. I might get nervous and tremble. I might not be able to keep up with the conversation. The list of possible failures is infinite. And faced with that terrifying list, avoiding seems like the only logical option. Because if you don't try, you can't fail. If you don't show up, you can't disappoint. It's cruel logic, but it makes sense to those trapped in it. The problem is that this choice also means you'll never learn, never improve, never discover that your fears are exaggerated. You stay frozen in fear, watching life pass by from a distance. The avoidant person's mind is a true battlefield of distorted thoughts. Cognitive psychology identifies several thought patterns that feed anxiety and avoidance. One of the most common is mind reading. The person assumes they know exactly what others are thinking about them, and always assumes the worst. That person is looking at me weird. They must be thinking I'm strange. So-and-so didn't answer my message. They're definitely avoiding me. Everyone at the party is having less fun because of me. These interpretations emerge as facts, but they're pure speculation. Another pattern is catastrophizing. The person takes a simple social situation and imagines the worst possible scenario. I'll go to that party, and it'll be horrible. I'll say something embarrassing, and everyone will laugh at me. I'll freeze in the middle of the presentation, and they'll think I'm incompetent. My life will end if this happens. These catastrophic predictions seem real and inevitable to those who experience them. But most of the time, these terrible scenarios never happen. The problem is that the person never finds this out because they avoid the situation before having a chance to see they were wrong. There's also generalization. One negative experience becomes a universal rule. I was rejected once, so I'll always be rejected. I made a fool of myself that day, so I always make a fool of myself. Those people didn't like me, so nobody likes me. This generalization completely ignores all the nuances of life. It ignores that contexts are different, that people are different, that even we ourselves are different at different moments. But for the anxious mind, exceptions don't exist. There's only the dark and absolute rule. These automatic thoughts aren't conscious choices. They arise quickly, seem true, and provoke intense emotions. The person doesn't even realize they're distorting reality. For them, these thoughts are simply the truth about how the world works. And as long as they believe these distortions, avoidance will continue seeming like the only sensible response. Because if everyone really thinks you're strange, if each interaction really will be horrible, if you really are always rejected, then why expose yourself to that? It's perfect logic based on false premises. But there's something even deeper beneath all these fears and thoughts. There's something that goes beyond the anxiety of the moment or fear of judgment. It's toxic shame. And shame is different from guilt. Guilt is about something you did. You did something wrong, you feel bad about it, you can apologize, you can change. Shame is about who you are. It's not that you did something bad, it's that you are bad. There's something fundamentally wrong with you as a person. This is the belief carried by someone with toxic shame. People with this kind of ingrained shame feel they're unacceptable in their essence. It doesn't matter what they do, how they present themselves, their achievements or efforts. Underneath everything, they believe there's a core defect that makes them unworthy of love, connection, and belonging. This belief is devastating because it has no apparent solution. If you do something wrong, you can fix it. But if you are wrong, how do you fix that? There's no way. So the only option seems to be hiding. Hiding who you really are. Keeping people away so they never discover the terrible truth about you. Social avoidance, in this context, is a desperate attempt to manage shame. If nobody really knows me, nobody can really reject me. If I keep everything superficial, I don't have to face the horror of being seen and considered unacceptable. It's an emotional survival strategy, but it demands an impossible price. Because human beings need genuine connection. They need to be seen, known, and accepted. When we avoid this to protect ourselves from shame, we create an empty life, where we exist but don't truly live, where we have physical presence but emotional absence. It's a ghostly existence, where we move through the world without really touching it or being touched by it. And there's a cruel detail in all of this. Some people seem to have a nervous system that's extremely sensitive to signals of rejection. It's as if they had a super powerful antenna that picks up even the smallest signs that they might not be accepted. Psychologists call this rejection hypersensitivity. For those who have this, small gestures that other people wouldn't even notice are interpreted as devastating rejection. Imagine you send someone a message and the person takes a few hours to respond. Most people think the person was busy and don't even worry about it. But someone with rejection hypersensitivity panics. The person doesn't want to talk to me anymore. I did something wrong. They're avoiding me. The emotional suffering is real and intense. Or, you enter a room and someone doesn't smile immediately. Most people don't even register it. But for the hypersensitive person, that's confirmation that they're not welcome, that they did something wrong, that they're being judged negatively. This hypersensitivity can have both biological and experiential origins. Some people seem to be born with a more reactive nervous system. Others develop this sensitivity after repeated experiences of real rejection in childhood. Maybe parents who were inconsistent in affection, sometimes loving, sometimes cold, leaving the child in constant alert trying to figure out if they were loved or not. Maybe repeated rejection from peers, never being chosen for teams, never being invited to parties. These experiences teach the brain to always be on guard, always looking for signs that rejection is coming. And when you live like this, every social interaction is an emotional minefield. You're constantly analyzing facial expressions, tones of voice, body language, trying to detect the slightest sign of rejection. It's exhausting, it's painful, and it makes total sense that someone living in this state of hypervigilance would choose to avoid social situations whenever possible. Because each interaction is an emotional Russian roulette where pain can emerge at any moment. It's easier, safer, to stay alone. At least alone you can't be rejected. But there's a terrible consequence to all this that goes beyond individual suffering. Adler talked about something he called social feeling, in German Gemeinschaftsgefühl. It's difficult to translate this word completely, but it refers to a deep feeling of belonging, of connection with the human community, of being part of something greater than yourself. Adler believed this feeling is a basic human need, as fundamental as food or shelter. We need to feel that we belong, that we have value to the group, that our existence matters to others. Chronic social avoidance destroys this vital feeling. When you spend years distancing yourself from people, avoiding connections, keeping distance from everything and everyone, you begin to feel fundamentally alienated. Not just lonely, but alienated. As if you were a foreigner on a planet where you shouldn't be. As if there were invisible glass separating you from the rest of humanity. You see people living, connecting, belonging. But you're on the outside looking in, unable to cross that barrier. The more you avoid, the more different you feel. And the more different you feel, the deeper the alienation becomes. Because if you already don't belong, why try? If you're fundamentally different from others, incompatible with the social world, why force yourself to participate? These beliefs strengthen over time. The person begins to build an identity around isolation. I'm someone who doesn't fit in, I don't belong anywhere. This identity, though painful, offers an explanation for the suffering and can even bring a strange comfort. At least there's a coherent narrative, even if it's a narrative of exclusion and disconnection. And here enters one of the most cruel and powerful psychological mechanisms of social avoidance. It all starts with a discovery that seems life-saving. When you avoid that situation you feared so much, the anxiety disappears instantly. It's like magic. Your body relaxes, the tension evaporates, you breathe, relieved. This relief is so real and so powerful that it becomes addictive. Your brain learns quickly, avoiding equals safety. And from then on, whenever a social situation approaches, your nervous system already knows the response. Avoid, and you'll be fine. Psychology calls this process negative reinforcement. Something uncomfortable is removed through avoidance, and this teaches your brain that avoiding is the solution. The problem is that each time you use this solution, you're simultaneously confirming a dangerous lie, that the situation you avoided was really threatening. You never give yourself a chance to discover that maybe it wasn't so terrible. You never learn that you could have survived, or even been pleasantly surprised. Instead, each avoidance adds another layer of cement around the prison you're building for yourself, and there's something even more insidious happening. As this pattern repeats week after week, month after month, isolation begins a subtle but profound transformation. What started as uncomfortable escape slowly transforms into a comfort zone. In the beginning, you felt guilt when canceling plans, anguish when refusing invitations. But over time, these emotions disappear. Isolation becomes your new normal. You adjust your entire life around it. And inside that bubble of solitude, strangely, you find a kind of peace. Because there, in your isolated space, you have total control. Nobody can judge you, nobody can reject you, nobody can hurt you. There are no unpleasant surprises, no social anxiety, no risk of humiliation. It's predictable. It's safe. It's comfortable the same way a prison cell becomes comfortable for someone who spent years in it. You know every corner, every routine, every limit. This brings a deceptive sense of security that's extremely difficult to abandon. But this security is completely illusory. Yes, you're protected from judgment, rejection, and social failures. But at what cost? You're also depriving yourself of genuine connections, of love, of intimacy, of belonging, of experiences that make life worth living. You're safe the same way someone locked in a bunker is safe. Technically protected, but completely isolated from everything that makes life meaningful. And worst of all, this security doesn't allow you to grow. You remain exactly as you are, without challenges, without learning, without development. It's stagnation disguised as protection. Adler had another important concept for understanding all this. He talked about social courage. It's not the absence of fear, but the capacity to act despite fear. It's the inner strength that allows facing interpersonal challenges even when you're scared, vulnerable, or insecure. It's what allows someone to go to a party even while feeling anxiety, start a conversation even with fear of rejection, share something personal even risking being misunderstood. This courage is essential for healthy social life. But social courage isn't something you simply have or don't have. It develops through experiences. Especially through experiences where you try something difficult, succeed, or at least survive the failure, and gain confidence in the process. Children develop social courage when they're encouraged by parents to try new things, when they're supported even when they fail, when they learn that mistakes are part of learning and not cause for shame. When they grow up in environments where they're valued, where their efforts are recognized, where failure doesn't mean catastrophe. But many people who avoid social contact never had a chance to develop this courage. They grew up in environments that did the opposite. Maybe extremely critical parents who pointed out every mistake, every imperfection. Maybe overprotective parents who never let the child face challenges or experience small, safe failures. Maybe emotional neglect where the child didn't receive the support and encouragement necessary to take risks. Maybe constant bullying that taught that the social world is cruel and merciless. Or maybe abuse that completely destroyed any sense of safety in the world. These experiences create what Adler called profound discouragement. The person learns from early on that trying is dangerous, that failing is devastating, that the world isn't safe and people aren't trustworthy. And when you carry this discouragement into adult life, every social situation seems like an impossible mountain to climb. You simply don't have the internal tools to face the challenge. Courage was never cultivated. Encouragement was never received. So you stay paralyzed, not out of laziness or weakness, but from lack of something essential you never had a chance to develop. And here enters something fascinating. Adler believed that we all develop what he called a lifestyle. Not in the superficial sense of hobbies or routines, but rather deep and unconscious patterns about how we face life. These patterns form mainly in the first years of life, based on our family experiences, on the messages we received about who we are and how the world works. And once formed, they operate automatically, guiding our choices and reactions without us realizing it. For someone who grew up in a critical environment, where they were never good enough, where every mistake was pointed out and every success ignored, the lifestyle that forms is based on inadequacy and fear of failure. The internalized message is, you're not capable, the world is too demanding, it's better not to try. For someone who grew up with overprotective parents who did everything for them and never let them face difficulties, the lifestyle is based on learned helplessness. I can't do things alone, the world is too dangerous for me, I need constant protection. For those who grew up in a neglectful environment where nobody was really present, the lifestyle says, I don't matter, nobody cares, the world is indifferent to my existence. These lifestyles become like lenses through which we see everything. We don't question these lenses because we don't even realize they're there. We simply think that's how the world is. And when the lifestyle is based on avoidance, on keeping distance, on not taking risks, this becomes the automatic way of responding to any social challenge. The person doesn't even consider other options. Avoidance isn't a conscious choice. It's simply how they function. It's the programming installed in the formative years of childhood that continues running in adult life without being questioned. The most interesting thing is that these unconscious patterns are incredibly resistant to change. Even when the person rationally understands they're avoiding and that it's not working, they continue doing the same thing. Because change doesn't happen only at the rational level. These patterns are rooted in deeper layers of the psyche. They were formed through intense emotional experiences, not through logic. So, logical reasoning alone is rarely enough to change them. Deep work is needed, usually with therapeutic help, to bring these patterns to consciousness and begin creating new ways of being. And Jung had something important to add to this discussion. He talked about individuation, a central concept in his psychology. Individuation is the process of becoming who you really are, of integrating all parts of yourself, of developing your unique singularity, while also connecting with something greater than you. It's the deepest psychological development process that a human being can experience. And Jung emphasized that this process doesn't happen in isolation. It happens through relationships. Others function as mirrors for us. They reflect parts of ourselves that we can't see alone. They challenge us, confront us, show us our blind spots. Through interaction with other people, especially in meaningful relationships, we're forced to grow, to question our assumptions, to integrate rejected aspects of ourselves. It's uncomfortable, it's difficult, but it's essential. Without this relational mirror, we stay trapped in rigid patterns, seeing only the limited version of ourselves that we already know. Social avoidance completely blocks this individuation process. When you keep distance from everyone, when you don't allow real intimacy, when you avoid conflicts and confrontations, you're never challenged to grow. You remain in a frozen version of yourself. Your shadows remain unintegrated because nobody reflects them back to you. Your unconscious complexes continue operating in the dark because there's no external light to illuminate them. You stay trapped in a capsule of limited self-awareness, spinning in the same mental patterns, without ever really evolving. And there's something even more tragic in this. Without connection with others, without being seen and recognized by another consciousness, we begin to lose the sense of who we are. Our identity fragments. We become like ghosts, existing but not really living. Jung believed we need recognition from others to maintain our psyche healthy and integrated. When we isolate ourselves completely, parts of us begin to die. Not physically, but psychologically. Unrealized potentials. Aspects of ourselves that could only emerge through relationship with others. All of this remains dormant, withered, never having a chance to flourish. So we arrive at the point where we need to look at the real consequences of all this. Not just psychological theory, but the concrete impact on the life of someone who chronically avoids social contact. And the consequences are devastating. The most obvious is profound loneliness. Not the temporary loneliness we all feel sometimes, but a chronic and penetrating loneliness that permeates every moment of existence. It's the feeling of being fundamentally alone in the world, that nobody really knows you, that you could disappear and nobody would notice or care. This chronic loneliness is directly linked to depression. Study after study shows that social isolation is one of the biggest risk factors for severe depression. It makes sense. Human beings are social creatures. Our brain evolved in group contexts. We need connection like we need air. When this basic need isn't met, something in us begins to wither. Life loses color, loses meaning. Activities that should bring pleasure become empty. The future seems hopeless. And depression, in turn, feeds even more avoidance, creating another destructive cycle where each element reinforces the other. And there's the issue of lost opportunities. Think of all the experiences that never happen when you avoid people. Friendships that never form. Romantic relationships that never begin. Career opportunities that pass unnoticed because they depended on networking. Adventures, travels, celebrations, moments of shared joy. All of this stays outside the isolation bubble. The person watches life happen to others while their own life remains narrow, limited, empty of rich experiences. And as the years pass, a terrible and specific feeling emerges. The feeling of an unlived life, of having gone through existence without really participating in it, of having been a spectator instead of a participant. This is one of the deepest pains a human being can experience. Because unlike other losses, this one can't be recovered. You can't go back and relive those years. Those moments that could have been, but never were, are lost forever. And this awareness, when it arrives usually in middle age or later, can be overwhelming. But despite all this sounding bleak, there is hope. Genuine hope. Because recognizing the pattern is the crucial first step toward change. If you recognized yourself in this description, if you saw your own patterns reflected in these words, this isn't cause for despair. It's cause for hope. Because you can't change what you don't see. You can't work on something that remains unconscious. Bringing these patterns to the light of consciousness is already transformative in itself. It's already the beginning of change. And there are proven paths of transformation. Jungian analysis works specifically with these unconscious complexes, with the shadow, with the patterns that formed in childhood, and continue operating invisibly. Through this deep work with a trained analyst, it's possible to unearth the roots of avoidant behavior, integrate rejected parts of yourself, and begin the true process of individuation. It's not quick, it's not easy, but it's deeply transformative. People who do this work report fundamental changes in how they see themselves and how they relate to the world. Adlerian therapy offers another powerful path. It focuses on rebuilding social feeling, on developing social courage through gradual experiences of success. An Adlerian therapist works to identify the problematic lifestyle formed in childhood and helps the person consciously create new, healthier patterns. They also work with the inferiority complex, helping the person develop a genuine sense of value and belonging. And crucially, they offer the encouragement that maybe was never received before. The therapist becomes that encouraging voice that says, "You can do this. You're capable. Mistakes are part of the learning process." Beyond therapy, there's gradual exposure. This doesn't mean brutally forcing yourself into terrifying situations. It means starting small, with manageable steps, and gradually expanding the comfort zone. Maybe starting by sending someone a message instead of avoiding. Then maybe a brief coffee with one person. Then maybe a small group. The key is going at the right pace. Not so fast that it causes additional trauma. Not so slow that there's no real progress. And each small success, each time you face the fear and survive, rebuilds a little bit of social courage. It proves to your brain that your catastrophic predictions were wrong. And there's something important to understand. You don't need to become an extroverted person. You don't need to love parties or crowds. You don't need to have dozens of friends. The goal isn't to change your fundamental nature. The goal is to free you from the prison of fear-based avoidance. It's to allow you to make conscious choices instead of being controlled by automatic fear patterns. Maybe you'll discover you really do prefer a few close friends to many acquaintances. Maybe you'll discover you like small, intimate gatherings. That's fine. The important thing is that these are free choices, not escapes from paralyzing terror. The journey out of social avoidance isn't linear. There will be advances and setbacks. Days where you feel brave, and days where fear returns with full force. This is normal. Expected. Part of the process. The important thing is not to give up. Not to interpret a setback as proof that you'll never make it. Deep psychological change takes time. The patterns you're trying to change were built over years, maybe decades. They won't disappear overnight. But with consistent work, with adequate support, with compassion for yourself during the process, change isn't just possible. It happens. And when this change begins to happen, when you begin to free yourself from these old patterns, something magical occurs. You begin to experience genuine connection. Not the superficial and anxious version of connection you may have known before, but something real, deep, nourishing. You discover that you can be seen and still be accepted. That you can show vulnerability and not be destroyed. That you can make social mistakes and the world doesn't end. That there are people who will like you not despite your imperfections, but including them. Because your imperfections are part of what makes you human, relatable, real. You discover that belonging is possible. That social feeling Adler talked about, that vital sensation of being part of the human community, can be recovered even after years of alienation. You begin to feel that you have a place in the world, that your existence matters, that you can contribute, can positively affect others' lives, can receive and give love. And this isn't just good. It's essential. It's what keeps us alive, not just biologically, but psychologically and spiritually. And as you reconnect with others, you also reconnect with yourself. The parts of you that were dormant begin to awaken. Talents you didn't even know you had emerge. Aspects of your personality that were hidden in the shadow begin to integrate. You become more complete, more whole, more yourself. This is the individuation process Jung talked about. And it can only happen when you leave isolation and allow life, with all its challenging and enriching relationships, to transform you. Life on the other side of avoidance isn't perfect. You'll still feel anxiety sometimes. You'll still have moments of insecurity. You'll still face occasional rejection, because that's part of the human experience. But the difference is that you won't be paralyzed by these things anymore. You'll have tools to deal with them. You'll have social courage to keep trying, even after stumbles. You'll have a sense of self-worth that doesn't depend completely on others' approval. And you'll have genuine connections that sustain you in difficult moments. If this content touched you, leave your like so other people can also find this message, and check out the first pinned comment for something special I left for you.